What would Jesus teach? We've been looking at the messages that Jesus gives through John in the book of Revelation to the 7 churches. We began last time to look at the last on that list. We have covered the city of Ephesus, that congregation that had left their first love, and Jesus tells them they need to repent, they need to fire things up again. The congregation at Smyrna, who Jesus said that they were enduring persecution, but he says there's more coming, it's going to get worse, so I need for you to stand up strong. Pergamum was compromising, and so Jesus tells them they need to face up to what the truth is. Thyatira was trying to coexist with evil and truth, and Jesus said compromise just does not work. Stop justifying the things that are wrong. Clean up. Sardis was dead, and Jesus said they needed to wake up to strengthen what remained. Philadelphia, we find there that Jesus says, I put before you an open door, and you're too weak to close it, and you have gone through this, you have been faithful, and Jesus praises them tremendously, and so he basically says, keep it up to them. And then we came to the church at Laodicea, and last time we began by looking at these first 3 verses in chapter 3, verse 14. To the angel of the church in Laodicea write, these are the words of the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the ruler of God's creation. I know your deeds, that you are neither cold or hot. I wish that you were either one or the other. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. We identified that this city of Laodicea sits here in this area of modern Turkey, that it sat on 2 trade routes, not just a north-south, but also an east-west trade route, that it was a very wealthy city. It was known for its textiles, for its banking, for its black wool, for its eye salve, that they enjoyed brandishing their wealth, showing off how well-to-do they were. We talked about the fact that there were 2 theaters in this town, which is rather unusual, but we indicated they had water troubles, and so they built clay pipes and brought their water from miles away. The mention of how that by the time that water made its way to Laodicea, that it was neither cold nor hot. It was indeed a terrible, terrible mess. All the minerals had been heated up, and so it was not good water, and those people understood what it was to be lukewarm. Laodicea, we said last time, corresponds to the nature of most churches in America, that we run this risk of affluence just like they did at Laodicea. Riches automatically sabotage spirituality. We looked at a number of passages last week that indicate the struggle that the wealthy are going to have with maintaining spirituality. Jesus said it's not impossible. It's possible with God, but it is difficult. Riches create comfort. Comforts can become more controlling than Christ. That rich man, harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. The rich young ruler becomes an example of that. The wealthy landowner, and the fact that we cannot serve God and money at the same time all indicate that truth. So when it comes to the strength at Laodicea, what we found was that there really is none identified. In contrast, Jesus said he couldn't find any fault in Philadelphia, but now at Laodicea he cannot find anything to even praise them about, which then brings us to the challenge that Jesus is going to administer to this group of people. They had lost their spiritual identity, self-sufficiency, and wealth, had depleted love and spiritual passion. Faithfulness and relationship with Jesus were lost within comfort-inducing indifference. So this people had become so affluent, they become so wealthy that they saw no need spiritually. And as a result, Jesus is going to have to challenge them to come back, to recognize their poverty. And here's how he's going to do that. Verse 17, he says this, you say, I am rich. I have acquired wealth and do not need a thing. But you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked. Let's break that down and just see what Jesus is identifying these people as. He said they're not seeing themselves this way, but he said, you say. The Greek word here is the word Lego, and that's not a little building thing of plastic nature. Other Greek words are used for the expressions of speech and talk, breaking silence with verbal noise. But Lego properly refers to the process of laying forth words in a set discourse. So there are other words in Greek that would identify speech. You know, when I think of that, it's Charlie Brown season, and so you get the proverbial adult talk in the Charlie Brown movies. Okay, there are other biblical words for that kind of noise, for that kind of speech, the blah, 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 blah. But when Lego is used, it's referencing the process of laying out an understandable, logical process by which one is thinking. So it involves much more of an explanation. It involves more of a discourse that is identifying the nature of what one believes. So what Jesus is saying is that this body of lukewarm followers lay out a discourse. They have a logical way of putting forth a number of things. And what is it that they put forth? First thing that Jesus identifies is they say that they're rich. They say that they're rich. The Greek word references wealth, but it grows from a root word that means to fill. And so when Jesus says that they are rich, what he's indicating is that these people say they have everything they need. They are comfortable, they are full. There is no need. Jesus couldn't make room into that heart because there's no need in the heart. He could never come and rule because the person is too full of other things. So when Jesus says, you say you're rich, he's saying, you are telling me that you have no room for me. You have no space for me. I have acquired wealth. The Greek word is the same as rich, but the form here stresses becoming wealthy. You say, I am rich. I have acquired wealth. So Jesus now says, you are looking at your self-sufficiency and you're saying it all comes from me. I have done this. I have accomplished this. This is because of what I have done. I have no spiritual need because I have successfully found all that I need. He says that these people say they do not need a thing. The three Greek words that are used here literally say, not even one demand do I hold. Not even one thing do I need. These people are so self-filled. Do not need a thing. Each phrase is a bold proclamation of the full satisfaction that they felt in their own self-sufficiency. And again, what Christ says is they just don't feel that way. They speak it all out. They lay it all out. Here it is. I sought after wealth. I got my fill. I have no room for anything else. Not even one demand do I have. Jesus says, but you do not realize. You do not know. The idea in the original word is that you do not see so as to discern. You don't comprehend. You don't visualize. You don't perceive that rather than all that self-sufficiency, that what you really are is that you are wretched. And that's a compounded word. They're based upon two words, and the first word means a balance. It's the word that oftentimes is translated by the talent, as we read about somebody having a talent in the New Testament. It's usually talking about a weight of wealth. Could have been silver, could have been gold. And so it's this weight, this balance, and the second part of it is a piercing trial. So Jesus says, you are so self-satisfied, you don't even recognize that when you're held in the balance, your life is nothing but a piercing trial of what real spirituality is. You're not even weighing out what's real. You're living in this land of make-believe, spiritual make-believe, where you think all that you have is all that you need. He says they also not only are wretched, but they are pitiful. The idea here is that someone in a pitiful condition deserves another's compassion. So Jesus says, you are so pitiful, you deserve my compassion, but you don't think you need it. Wretched, pitiful, and poor. The Greek word that is used here is the word for the poorest of people. The word that would have been used for beggar, pauper. It's from a root word meaning cringing, total distress. So Jesus says, you don't recognize that you are the beggar on the street who has nothing, who is completely destitute. He says you don't recognize that you're blind. The idea in this Greek word has to do with smoke. And so it's the idea of being covered with a smoke screen. These folks were so bad off, they just chose to live in this make-believe smoke screen world. Jesus said, you don't know you're blind. You don't know that you're naked. Absolutely nude, literally or figuratively is what the word means. These people are espousing their wealth, and one of the ways that happened was in the clothing they chose, in the gold that adorned their clothing. And Jesus says, you're proclaiming your wealth, but you're naked. You have nothing. You're destitute. You're blind, living in a smoke world. Jesus identifies that these Christians, although feeling complete and content, they are unbalanced, they are deserving pity, they are beggars, they are inflated with self-deceit, and they're totally naked. There can be no greater needs than what Jesus describes. But this congregation feels no need. They feel complete and satisfied. Living within the wealth of Laodicea, these comfortable Christians were the most needy of all the churches that Jesus addressed in the book of Revelation. One of the saddest things about their self-satisfied state was that they had no idea of their impoverished neediness. That's why this challenge of Jesus comes so strongly to them. He's got to break through somehow. This facade of comfortable and self-satisfaction, he's got to break through that. And so he labels them and he says, you're wretched and you're poor and you're beggars. And he just lays it all out there. You're totally naked. You need something. When spiritually comfortable, there is no motivation to do anything different.
Actually, Jesus explains exactly why he feels like vomiting when he thinks of them. Because the next verse goes on to say, because you say you are wealthy, and you have prospered, and you have need of nothing. Which meant that really they didn't even need Jesus. They had plenty of money, and it excluded him from their lives. Back when I was a kid in church, we used to have this old song we'd sing, I need thee, oh, I need thee every hour, I need thee. Well, I'm telling you, that was not in the Laodicean hymnal. What they really needed was a better car and a nicer house and an office on a higher floor, and they had plenty of money to buy themselves all of those kinds of things. And their affluence had excluded Jesus from their lives. I can see why Jesus felt the way he did. It reminds me of what the Laodiceans said to the emperor after that horrific earthquake in AD 17, when he said, no thanks, we don't need your help. We have all we need. You know, the danger of affluence crowding out Jesus is an old problem. Back in Deuteronomy, God warned the Israelites that when he brought them into the Canaan land that was rich with vineyards and houses that they did not build and all of the affluence that they would find there, he said, then beware, lest thou forget the Lord thy God. It's an important warning, isn't it? Abraham, the father of the children of Israel, God made him a promise that he would be the father of a great nation, and that he would have a son, and that would be the beginning of the nation. Well, the son never came, and he became old, and Sarah became old, and then miraculously, God gave them a son, Isaac. What a gift from God, the promise. But strangely enough, God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac to him. Personally, I think that was kind of a cruel request. It's kind of one of those things like, God, don't ask him to do that. But there was deep meaning there. One of the meetings is that Abraham was traveling among the Canaanites, and their highest allegiance to their gods was to sacrifice their children on the altar to their gods. I wonder if God was saying, are you willing to love me as much as these pagans love their gods of wood and stone? Well, maybe. But once Abraham takes Isaac and places him on the altar and raises the knife, and God says, stop, I was just testing you. Now I know that you fear God more than anything I've given you. I think the test was this: Abraham, do you love God, the giver, more than you love the gift? That was the test for the Laodiceans. They had come to love the gifts of God more than the one who gave it to them. They loved the gifts more than the giver. And Jesus offers a stinging reproof for that approach to life.
All they saw around them was lukewarmness. So there was no challenge that came from any place else. As a result, there was no motivation to even look for anything different. It's not like the congregation was challenging itself, because everybody was in the same boat. Everybody was self-satisfied. Everyone was lukewarm. And to this, Jesus is going to counsel them. He's going to lay a foundation for them to change. Now, this is nothing new. Jesus has always laid a very similar foundation when it comes to spiritual things. We go back to the first recorded public sermon that Jesus gave in Matthew chapter 7. He begins in chapter 5, and he talks about, those blessings, the Beatitudes, how people who hunger and thirst will be satisfied. He goes into a number of things, comparisons about the old law and the new law, and now he says, I'm saying these things. And then he gets to chapter 7, and he talks about don't judge, and then he says, by their fruits you will know them. And so notice what's coming from people's lives. That'll be a testimony of who they are. And then he gets down towards the end of this last chapter, and he's talked about judgment and how people need to be real and bearing real fruit for who they really are serving. And then he says this: not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Now just think about what he's saying. Here is the very beginning of Jesus' ministry. He's encouraging people to come after his new way of teaching and thinking and processing, this new spiritual development. But then he says, not everybody that comes and says that I'm the Lord is going to go into heaven. Not going to enter into heaven. Well, why not? Because many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons and perform many miracles? Then I will say to them, I never knew you. People are going to be, again, so self-reliant, so relying upon their own energies and what they have accomplished and what they've done, that they have no need for Jesus. And so stand before Jesus and say, look at what I've done for you, Lord. And Jesus is going to say, your name, it doesn't seem to be in the book. I don't know you. Who are you? So Jesus, this isn't anything new. This is how Jesus began his ministry, and this is how he's ending his message to the last of the churches in the book of Revelation. He's saying, you can't just go around proclaiming me Lord and live in your self-satisfaction and your own accomplishments and in your own wealth. You must recognize your neediness and come to me for that supply. Experiencing Jesus is so much different than a comfortable self-sufficiency. I'm doing as much as the other guy. All of that is just part of the Christ-sickening religious service. Jesus foretold on the mountain that people would be comfortable in calling him Lord, but he would never know them. In Laodicea, we see the fulfillment of what was taught earlier. And so now what happens is Jesus is going to try to afflict the comfortable. This congregation of comfortable Christians, he's trying to upset them. And so he says in verse 18, I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire, so that you become rich, and white clothes to wear, so you can cover your shameful nakedness, and salve to put on your eyes, so you can see. Counsel, a fascinating word, compounded from the Greek word union and advice. Jesus is going to give them advice, which if they take it in, if they unite with that advice, it's going to bring them to relationship with him. I'm going to tell you how it really is spiritually. That's the counsel that's going on here. Listen to this and you'll unite with me. He says, you need to buy from me gold refined in fire. Buy is interesting because I've always read that and thought, well, Jesus is saying, buy from me. But buying implies that you have something to purchase it with. And what has Jesus already said of these people? They're beggars. They're poor. They're wretched. They're pitiful. They don't have anything to buy this with. So what I found out is that the word that's used here for buy isn't about money. It's about location. It actually means the market. It's where people went to get what they needed, to buy what they needed. And so when Jesus is telling them to buy, he's saying, you come to the spiritual marketplace. You can't supply this. You don't have this. You have to come to the source if you want to get from me. And he says, when you come, you can buy from me gold that is refined by fire. Gold. Pure spiritual enlightenment. Again, here are these people believing that they have all this wealth, all this prosperity. And Jesus says, you have nothing, but I am absolute pure gold. I am pure gold. And it's interesting that he says that this gold has been what? Been refined by fire. Now we recognize in other language from other passages that the refining by fire usually refers to a trial or a process of trial that removes the things that are less significant and purifies the one who's being tried. Who among humanity has ever endured the same level of trial as Jesus Christ? So here Jesus is not just saying, you need to buy from me gold because I'm God's son. He's saying, you need to come to me for pure gold that's been refined by fire. I've been through the trial. I have been tested. Everything's been removed from me, but that which is pure. Jesus had endured the trial. You need to buy from me refined gold. And if they do that, he says, you will become rich. A comfortable, apathetic, meaningless, and sickening spirituality can be transformed into that which is priceless. You come to me. You come to the place where pure gold is available, and you will become rich. Two pictures there. One of those is iron pyrite, and the other is gold. Which is which? I had to search for a long time because sometimes iron pyrite's pretty easy to pick up. The one with a dark background is actually iron pyrite, fool's gold. And the other is gold. Do you see the Laodiceans? Their trust was in fool's gold. They believed they were rich. Jesus says, you're wretched. You need to come to me and you need to buy from me pure gold. He also says you come to the marketplace where I can give you white clothing. And you can wear this clothing, and it's not just going to cover your body. What's it going to cover? Your shamefulness. You come to me in your neediness, recognizing not everything you have is complete. You are not totally filled. You have lackings. And you come to me in that state, and I will give you a garment that covers up all of your shame. That's the only way you will be totally complete. Symbolic of pure righteousness that would cover all of their shame. Galatians chapter 3 and verse 27 mentions that all of us have been baptized into Christ, have what? We've clothed ourselves with Christ. He's the garment by which our shamefulness is covered. And then Paul will talk about when the The perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality. Then will come about the truth of the saying, death is swallowed up in victory. You see, the final clothing that we get to put on transforms us into the new dwelling place, the heaven of God. And that's when death is swallowed up in victory, covers our shame. And then Jesus ends by saying, you need to buy from me salve to put on your eyes. One of the reasons that many of the people in Laodicea were wealthy was because of this medical salve that people traveled from all over the world to purchase. It was known for its healing quality. And here Jesus is saying, you need to buy from me. You need to get from me real eye salve. Because a correct worldview is obtained only when one allows the view to be rooted not in political agendas, legal decrees, or educational influences, but by the one who knows all, sees all, and controls all. Your worldview needs to be shaped by me. Come to me and let me correct your vision. Let me give you this salve by which you will be able to see. There are actually three different Greek words for the word see. One is blepe. It means to see for the facts about something. The other is theore, which means to see something and be astonished by it. And the other is eden, which means to perceive. You see it and you understand something. Okay, Jesus says, I want you to come and I want you to buy eye salve from me so that you can see. Which of those words do you think is used by John? Blepe. So you can see the facts. Spirituality begins with not being astonished. It begins not with a complete perception and understanding. Spirituality begins by just seeing the facts that Jesus is all that we need. And if we don't get that one thing, we're not going to get anything else. And so when Christ challenges these people to correct their vision by the eye salve that he's offering them, he's not saying, oh, you need to perceive all these deep spiritual truths. He's saying, you need to know you need me. Folks, do we have that kind of passion for needing Jesus today? Do you live with that kind of passion that your life needs him, and without him, you are poor, you are wretched, you are naked, you are in need? Jesus says, you need to get this eye salve so that you can see. So these sick, self-satisfied saints who believe they are rich, wealthy, and don't need a thing, Jesus says, you are wretched, you are pitiful, you are poor, you're blind, and you're naked. And he says, the only way that you can be satisfied is to come to me. The only course to correct these corrupted and comfortable Christians' complacency was by a union with the advice of Jesus. Buy from him real gold, buy from him garments of righteousness that cover all shame, and buy from him a view of this world that trusts the facts of his spiritual truths regardless of our fleshly longings and environment. That's what Jesus says. Wow. You talk about laying it on the line. Jesus is letting these folks know where it's at. But it's not the end of the story, so we will look next week at how Jesus said these people can accept what he's offering them, how they can acquire the very things that they truly need. The individuals at Laodicea had lost their spiritual passion. Jesus challenges them to regain it by setting aside their comfortable but empty Christianity. Once comfort is injected